Evening, everyone. This is Scott Anderson with AgriBest Feeds, and we're excited to have our webinar here tonight. We've got Tim Williams on the line. He's a soil specialist with Redmond. Excited to have him here, and just want to kind of connect with you on what AgriBest Feeds is all about. We're all about enhancing lives and working with farmers and ranchers with our uniquely better product lines and superior customer service. We are very involved in the cattle and horse industries and have been helping out with that, but there's been a new opportunity that's come as we've kind of discovered through soil health and being able to help support our animals through better soil and also crops and plant life. So Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you to go ahead and kind of go through our presentation this evening, and we'll have a Q&A here at the end, so you'll be able to raise your hand or chat or ask questions. But Tim, if you want to go ahead and roll.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Well, welcome everybody. It's good to be with you. I'm probably the only one on from Wisconsin is what I'm guessing. So we'll get moving here on the healthy soil. And so I've been involved in healthy soil for about 17 years and 12 years with a company called Midwestern Bioag, and about the last 5 years with Redmond Minerals. So I really enjoy the soil and talking about the healthy aspect of it. And I really enjoy learning about the Redmond products and how it helps support the healthy soil system. So we're going to get into that. So when you talk about healthy soil, there's really three parts to it. And that's why when you see the puzzle there, you've got the biological piece of the puzzle, you've got the physical, and then you have the nutrients. We're going to talk about each one of those tonight. So you probably heard of the term regenerative agriculture. That's kind of a big buzzword right now out in the industry. It's also kind of been talked about as biological farming. And I like this definition for regenerative agriculture: putting new life into old soil. I think that's really what it's all about. And the four key concepts that the industry is talking about, even the NRCS and many other soil health companies, they talk about minimizing disturbance, maximizing soil cover, maximizing biodiversity, and maximizing presence of living roots. And we'll be talking about that a little bit, and that'll be coming up in our discussion tonight. So what is healthy soil? A good definition is a balanced living ecosystem essential to plant, animal, and human life. You can see the percentages there of what is so-called ideal soil. I don't know if anybody's got ideal soil. There's always seems to be something you can improve on. But you can see the percentages there. And so if you think about what happens when we get too much rain, for example, well, what's going to happen is that water percentage is going to jump up. The water is going to displace the air. The mineral particles will stay the same. And organic matter will stay the same too. And organisms might drop some because they're not going to reproduce because they have to have oxygen. So there's always a big shift when you don't have ideal conditions and you have soil stresses, so to speak. Those percentages are going to stress, and that's what leads to a lot of challenges, as you guys know. So getting into the biological, so that's really the life of the soil. And we're just barely touching on it. And soil scientists and scientists say that the soil system is probably your most complicated system there is, and it's what we know the least about. So we need to remember that. We're just touching on it. These are a few fun facts, what I call them. You've maybe heard of these. Just to kind of explain just some of the diversity and just some of the amazing things that's involved in soil health. There are more microbes in one handful of soil than there are people on Earth. That's incredible. In 1 gram of soil, there can be 15,000 species of bacteria. Now that's diversity. And it's interesting that 1 gram of soil weighs about what a paperclip does. So earthworms are pretty amazing. We know that. And earthworms are a great indicator of soil health. And I heard this years ago that they say 25 earthworms in a cubic foot can lead to 70 pounds of nitrogen per acre. Just remember, there's always a reason why those birds like earthworms. They're full of protein. Protein is nitrogen. The earthworm casts, or some people call them castings, can contain up to 10 times the humus and the nutrients than the surrounding soil. So I don't know if you guys have ever purchased worm castings, or if you know you can purchase them, but they're not inexpensive. And they're used in a lot of like home gardening products, and they're actually pretty popular. These are a few of the different species of the life in the soil. They all have different functions. They all work together or against each other, depending on if the balance is correct or not. So bacteria is the first one. These are neat photos because most of the time we don't have a clue what all these species look like. We know what earthworms look like, right? But we don't know what a lot of the food is in the food web for all these different species. So bacteria is one of them. Bacteria does a lot with nutrient cycling, also likes to decompose green organic matter. Actinomycetes is actually a form of bacteria too. And actinomycetes is responsible for giving soil its earthy aroma. So that smell that smells like a freshly cut potato, that's what a healthy root should smell like. Healthy soil should smell like. And actinomycetes actually releases some antibiotics and helps control some pathogens in the soil. Nematodes, that's the creepy looking one there. And that happens to be a parasitic nematode. There's also good nematodes in the soil, just like there's good bacteria, bad bacteria. Every living system, doesn't matter if it's in us, in the soil, in an animal, there's a combination and a balance of good and bad. And as long as your good are more populated than the bad, you're going to keep things in check. When it isn't, that's when disease sets in. Protozoa, that actually is a favorite food of bacteria, and the bacteria love that protozoa. And protozoa, when you get more of those, it helps deliver nitrogen into the plant. So it's really involved with nitrogen utilization. This is one of my favorites because it's probably one of the most critical ones, if you can say that. Mycorrhizae fungi. One of the big things it does is it attaches onto the fine root hairs. So it's a network of these really fine fungi, and it's called a hyphae. The hyphae can extend out miles into the soil, and it taps into aggregates in the soil. And when it does that, it taps into phosphorus and it taps into moisture. So the more you have of these, the more you're going to have stress resistance, like for drought situations. It's a favorite food for earthworms. And it's basically, if you have, a lot of times you see mushrooms, that's basically mycorrhizae fungi. So it's really, really important. And the biggest thing that inhibits the growth of these mycorrhizae is soluble phosphorus. So if you have too much soluble phosphorus from too much liquid manure, or just putting on too much phosphorus, you'll create a lazy plant, and the plant will basically communicate that it doesn't need this fungi, and so the fungi will not grow. It's one of nature's way they communicates with each other. So now moving into the physical. Physical is basically like your structure, air and water management. So there's always a lot of talk about the physical. And in the last 100 years, over-tillage has decreased soil organic matter levels by 60%. That's what the estimate is. It can take 500 to thousands of years to form an inch of topsoil. And 1% increase of organic matter helps hold 20,000 gallons more water per acre. So that's like if you would increase from a 2% organic matter to a 3% organic matter. Now I don't know, Scott, what are a lot of probably the listeners' organic matter levels? What would you, is it 2% and under, or is it over 2%?
You guys want to
know?
If you guys want to just put down in the chat if you know what your organic matter is, if you could chat that real quick, maybe just with your state and chat, that might be helpful here. And while people are doing that, I want to throw a couple polls up here real quick. Let's see. So we're under in Montana. 1.5 to 3%. Let me launch the poll here on soil types. If you could just click on one of those, what's your classify the majority of your soil type on your farm? If you can click on that real quick, we'll do that. And any other organic matter? Anybody have organic matter numbers? Looks like a lot of sandy loam. About
it's going to be a little bit lower then.
I will end that one and share the results real quick. Brittany down in lost that. Let's pull that back up. Brittany is anywhere from 0.5 to 2, maybe 3 at best at spots.
Okay.
And let's see. I'll pull up another one here. Let's talk about type of farm do you have? Irrigated, dry land, or both? Like we're pretty close on that. Well, dry land's kind of pulling ahead a little bit now. I'll end that one and share that. So we're about 53% dry land, 33% irrigated, and was that 13% both?
Okay.
And let's see, had one on tillage here. We were talking about that. So are you majority of your practice no till, strip till, kind of conventional but minimal till, or conventional till on your operations? Kind of looking
no till, yep.
No till, minimal till. Give a couple more seconds on that one. Then I'll have another one that pops up here on cover crops. So this is what the results were looking like on the tillage practices. 38% no-till, and the rest some sort of conventional, about 46 minimal, and 15% conventional. And let's see, I think the other one I had was cover crops. Do you use cover crops currently? And getting most of the votes in here. We're 58% yes and 42% no at this point. All right, so we'll let's see, I think that was did the soil type, irrigation, tillage. Maybe we've done all of them. All right, I'll let you continue there, Tim.
Okay, so excellent. Thanks for doing those. It gives me a lot better understanding of the audience, definitely. So, you know, your soil type, what you have, you have. You can't change your soil type, but you can optimize it, I guess would be a good word. And I know when I was doing meetings in Nebraska recently, there was quite a few that were saying, you know, it's really hard to increase organic matter on sandy or sandy loam soil. And there can be a challenge with that, but it doesn't mean you still can't utilize healthy soil management practices and optimize what you have. But I always find it interesting because if you can increase that organic matter, along with that comes the humus. Humus is the black particles in your soil that creates more of that sponge-like condition. When you look at the photos here on this slide, if you have a sponge-like, you're going to absorb a lot more water. Root systems are going to penetrate that. They're going to go down instead of hitting a compaction layer and then spreading out. So you'll have a lot better foundation, obviously. And that's what we want. So this is directly related to tillage, this photo here, or this slide. And the way it works is we're really trying to control carbon. And I don't know if you guys are up on it, if you've been reading about carbon, but carbon's a big thing and it's going to become bigger. They're talking, there's already carbon credits available, and there's going to be more of that available all the time. So, you know, everything in the soil is about balance. And that's the big word I want you to think about tonight. Whether it's your soil, food, web, all the different species, if you have that balance, good things are going to happen. With your minerals, if you have that balance, positive things are going to happen. If you have the right balance of carbon and oxygen in your soil, positive things are going to happen. And what happens if you overwork your soil, like with over tillage? And I was glad to see the big movement now is no till and minimal tillage. And that is awesome because you're managing your carbon when you do that. Over tillage, you're bringing in more oxygen, which you can see on this slide. As you bring in more oxygen, you actually fuel the microbes, which then starts decomposing your carbon in the soil, because your carbon is the fuel for your microbes. So as they repopulate, it's kind of like you get too many microbes in the soil. And when then they breathe, just like you and I, and when they breathe, they release carbon dioxide. And you can see that CO2 then goes up in the atmosphere. That's when you get too much CO2. And of course, a lot of people say that's a negative for the environment, for weather patterns and all that, greenhouse gases, all that. The other thing it does is you want a combination of macro aggregates, which are your bigger aggregates in the soil, and your micro aggregates. When those macro aggregates are disrupted because of all that oxygen, what happens is the particles are a lot finer, and then they have the ability to compress and compact together because you're losing airspace. So macro aggregates, you get more airspace. Micro aggregates, you get less, and you're going to get more compaction when you have the micro aggregates. Then you like heavy equipment can press it together. Too much rain can press those microaggregates together. So oxygen in our soil is critical for the structure, but also for the biology. Your healthy bacteria in the soil are aerobic bacteria, which means oxygen loving. So one of your goals should be is to deepen your aerobic zone. Unhealthy soil conditions are always caused by anaerobic conditions, which means displacement of oxygen, lack of oxygen. So too much water, too much compaction, you're going to create that environment for your anaerobic bacteria, which are always the ones that are your disease-causing bacteria. So it's important to remember that. So now moving into nutrients. So this is one slide and there's newer studies, but it's interesting that the US Department of Agriculture has actually been involved in these studies because they are concerned about what's happening to the soil in our country. And this isn't just in our country, this is worldwide, by the way. So you can see there's different times when these studies take place, but basically it shows that the mineral level in our soils have dropped significantly. Now there was a big drop, more so in the early 1900s, dropping down to about 1968, and then it leveled off. So that's a positive that it leveled off, but the problem is it still drops significantly through the 1900s. Some of the things that causes that is our yields have gone up. We've had to get more yields to survive in farming overall. So that's one thing that's happened. Traditionally, we went from using more micronutrients to the NP and K system. So we haven't been adding as many micronutrients. So that's dropped a lot of the mineral content. And these are the averages of calcium, magnesium, iron in cabbage, lettuce, tomatoes, and spinach. I've seen other research where apples too, they say the amount of calcium, I think it was, in apples are like 50% of what it was years ago. So, you know, you've heard that old saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Well, now you got to change that. It's 2 or 3 apples a day. So I'm lucky if I eat one. I don't know about you. So there's soil scientists say there's essential elements for plant growth. So I think it's interesting that in the elemental table, which you learned about probably in chemistry, there's 90 minerals or so, and yet soil scientists claim that there's like 16 essential elements. I think part of it is that's all they've been able to wrap their minds around because it's so complicated. But if you do look at these, there's 2 of them that I really want to draw attention to, and that is sodium and chlorine, which chloride is what delivers that. So that's what salt is, and our sea salt has got 93% sodium chloride in it. But that's interesting, and we're going to come back to some of these different minerals a little bit later. So here's another one of those cycles. There's a lot of different cycles. Here's the carbon cycle. This is, we were talking about a little bit earlier, but it's also involved in photosynthesis too. So 50% or more of all the carbon from photosynthesis is sent to the roots and releases microbial food. That doesn't happen during the day. That happens in the evening when the sun goes down, because photosynthesis shuts down at that point. What's interesting is the active carbon, which is, they call it root exudates. It's basically sugars, and then it includes glomalin, which is a glue. That glue helps form those aggregates we were talking about earlier. So that happens, and when the bacteria is fed, it's right around the root zone. It's called the rhizosphere. That's where a lot of mineral release and activity takes place. It's a very low pH there. It's about a pH of about a 4, right in that zone. And then the sun comes up the next day and photosynthesis starts again, which is basically the conversion of energy from the sun to food for the plant. So aged carbon, or the humus, that's your stable organic matter. That's those black particles that I talked about earlier. That is not as easily consumed by microbes as like your green organic matter, your fresh organic matter. And that helps form those large aggregates, improving your soil structure. So again, we're talking about the balance here. I found this years ago from the last company I was involved with. Gary Zimmer was the president. He's written books called The Biological Farmer, and that's what this is from. What I want to draw your attention to is, okay, there's a certain amount of minerals in soil. The challenge often is that those minerals are not available. The reason they're not available is because the environment for the biology is not what it should be often. Lack of oxygen, like I mentioned earlier. Population is down. Sometimes it's your soil type has got a little bit to do with it. Organic matter can be low. There's a lot of different reasons that causes it. But depending on the soil, if any of you has a silt loam soil, and you look at potash, you can have 35,000 pounds of potash per acre in the top 6 inches. So it's not that it isn't there, it's that it's locked up. Now there's significantly less phosphate or phosphorus, and there's a lot less calcium too. So what I've found over the years, 17 years of doing this, when you improve the environment for the microbes in the soil, they deliver the minerals from the soil to the plant. They're like the bridge that takes those minerals to the plant. So how do you tap into it? You have to have healthy soil. You have to have the right numbers of microbes. You have to have air in your soil. And you're going to tap into a lot of those nutrients. So you can earn the right to cut back on purchased fertilizer is what we find. A lot of times it's nitrogen, a lot of times it's P, and a lot of times it's K. So this is the nitrogen cycle. The atmosphere has 80% nitrogen, but our challenge is it's not always available to the plant because it has to go through a cycle. It's got to be converted over to a form that the plant can recognize and utilize. We're not going to get into that a lot, but I just want you to know, again, the biology is the center of what makes all that happen. And if you increase the depth of the aerobic zone, like I said, more oxygen and recovery of nutrients, nitrogen, that's what's going to happen, guaranteed. When lightning strikes, this is just a fun fact again. So the form of nitrogen that's the most available is the nitrate form. That's also when it's the most susceptible to leaching. But when lightning strikes, there's actually atmospheric nitrogen is developed, and then it's delivered through rainwater into the soil, and the roots in the crop can utilize it immediately. So that's pretty neat. That's one reason you see the response you do to a thunderstorm and rain. So here's a few questions I want you to think about. Throughout the years I've been doing this has really just come to my mind, and it's like I contemplate this and think about this. And one of them is, why are superweeds, erosion, and dead zones on the increase in agriculture in the US? Why is that happening if we are doing everything right? Secondly, if a crop only needs 16 to 20 essential elements, why are there over 90 elements found in nature? And the other thing is, why doesn't the industry promote more of these elements? Do you think when you take a crop off that you're only taking N, P, and K off? There's 90 elements in nature, and I'm guessing your crop is taking 90 elements off. So they're all important. They all work together. They're in different percentages, but they're all critical. And if soil is the stomach of the plant, why doesn't the industry balance complete rations for the soil? I can relate some to the idea that, okay, if you're growing corn and corn takes off so many pounds of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, that you need to put that on. But then what about calcium? What about sulfur? What about magnesium? What about micronutrients? What about rare earth minerals? Why aren't they being addressed? So what is the value of healthy soil management practices? I think everybody knows that if I was going to ask you, would you rather have healthy soil or unhealthy soil? That's like, duh, of course you're going to want healthy soil, right? But what is the value of it? So the USDA says that the return on a 1% increase in organic matter is $30 per acre due to more water holding capacity and so nitrogen and phosphorus. They're not even looking at potassium and all your other minerals. So I think Britt is on here listening, and Britt had commented in Nebraska when we were doing meetings. She's an agronomist there, and she commented she thought it'd be a lot higher than that. So it's hard to put numbers on it, but this is, just keep this in mind. The second one is earn the right to reduce fertilizer inputs due to accessing more nutrients locked up in the soil. We talked about that. Earn the right to purchase 25 to 50% less nitrogen as more is utilized from the atmosphere and organic matter. So kind of the magic number I think that a lot of agronomists use around the country is 1 unit of nitrogen per bushel of corn. Well, I know a lot of farmers, and I've met a lot of them over the years, that they use half a unit of nitrogen or 3/4 of a unit of nitrogen because their soil is more efficient. So they can utilize more of that nitrogen from the atmosphere. But you do have to earn the right to do that. It doesn't just automatically happen. Healthy soil is a numbers game. If you build up your beneficials in greater numbers than the disease-causing pathogen, you're going to have healthier soil. You're going to have less disease pressure. And then you're going to have more also complete proteins, complete sugars in the plant, and you will have less insect pressure too, because insects go after your weaker crop, your sicker crop. Just like if you raise livestock, is it your healthiest livestock that gets sick, or is it the ones that have challenges with their health? There's also laws that actually explains this, which I think is pretty fascinating. I didn't know that till recently. I've been talking about it for years. I was doing more research and I discovered this Gauzy's law is one, and there's this other theory that actually supports this in ecology. This is part of nature. It's the way nature works. So the biological, physical, and the nutrients, those pieces, it's not always easy to get them to fit together. Just like any puzzle, a 3-piece is pretty simple, but this is more probably a 5,000-piece puzzle when you really look at it. And it's not easy to put together. And sometimes it seems like you take 1 step forward, 2 back. But a lot of it is really what you decide to do in your mind. This is something new, and this is so timely. I got to share this, Scott. I hope you'll let me share this. I talked to a beef farmer in Louisiana today. He told me for years, he farmed conventionally, put on the old traditional NP and K program, and he said he was always tweaking things in his fertilizer, always tweaking things in the mineral program for his beef cows. Things were never really improving very much though. And it was driving him crazy. So he started thinking about a common sense approach, and he started focusing on the health of the soil. He told me when he started out, he was at about a 1% organic matter. Today, he says he averages 4% organic matter. This guy is doing everything he can with cover crops, vice versa. And he said his farm has changed around, and he said it has blown his mind to think where he's come on his farm, and to think that it wasn't that many years ago that he thought the stuff he's doing now was crazy, was foolishness. Nobody could do it. I talked to him for about an hour today. It was an amazing conversation. So now we're going to get into the minerals and how the Redmond products can have an impact on a healthy soil management program. We're going to go down this road. We like to say we feel it's the foundation of every mineral program on the farm, whether it's the livestock and whether it's the soil. So what are sea minerals? This guy right here, Maynard Murray, I think he started out in about the 40s or so, 1940. He was a medical doctor, discovered and was intrigued with the health of sea life, basically. And he started doing research, and he wanted to see the impact that ocean water would have on the soil, plants, animals, and people. He found some amazing things. This is his book he wrote. It's an easy book, small book. I encourage you to get it. Sea Energy Agriculture. Few quick concepts. The minerals in our salt, they are in the crystalloid form. That form is the most available form of minerals known to mankind. It's one reason why if you go in to see a doctor, often you will get a shot of salt water, because doctors know your patient's body will utilize those minerals really, really quick. Those minerals can get into the cellular level almost immediately. Where do sea minerals come from? Well, volcanic activity, and it just happens to be that our clay, which we call conditioner, is weathered volcanic ash. Underwater vents, there's thousands of these that shoot up minerals all over in the ocean. And then erosion, the salts from erosion, from rocks, so forth, goes into the groundwater, which sooner or later will end up in the ocean. So why sea minerals? Another thing is the analysis of the elements found in human blood and ocean water is almost identical. And this shows that, this demonstrates that. This is the blood serum, 93% sodium, 7% other minerals. What is our salt? Our salt is 93% on average, sodium chloride, 7% other minerals. So you can see just how similar it is. We say that it's nature's perfect balance. We didn't create it. Our creator balanced it. And I don't think man would ever be smart enough to balance minerals like this with 60 plus minerals when you test it out to parts per million. If you test it out to parts per billion, over 90 minerals, perfectly balanced. Some of them are such small percentages, it's amazing that they're even in there. This here shows, this goes way back. It just shows the relationship of minerals. Basically, it shows that there's different minerals and these lines all connect the ones and how they all work together. So there's a big synergism of all the minerals, even though there's some that are really small percentages, they're still important. Just because they're not all macronutrients does not mean they're important. And then there's different forms of mineral availability too. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that tonight. So this here is what the inside our salt mine looks like. So Utah was covered by an ancient ocean. The Jurassic era, the ocean, because of earthquakes, dried up and the salt deposit got pushed up to the surface. The Bouchard family, this was in the 50s. They knew that there was a lot of salt in the area. Some of their neighbors had little mini salt mines going. They had some tough times in farming and they decided, I bet if we dig down, we're going to find salt. So they did that and they found the main vein. And then there was a lot of volcanic activity. And so the volcanoes dropped the bentonite clay on top of this and helped preserve it for us. So this is about 40 by 80 feet. Scott, you've been out here and seen this how many times now? Quite a few.
Yep, quite a few, 6 maybe.
Yeah, 6 times. So they've never had a cave in because when that deposit got pushed up to the surface, it got moved from a horizontal deposit to a vertical deposit. And I think that's pretty cool. It's really dark down there when all the lights are turned off, isn't it, Scott?
Yeah, that's for sure.
There's about 16 miles of underground tunnels right now. And they're about 500 feet down. The deposit goes down about a mile. And I think it runs a couple miles long, the main vein of it. So it's interesting to know that we have different divisions at Redmond. We have the ag division, we have an equine division, Redmond hunt division. We have an industrial division where they sell pond clay, they sell road salt, and there's a lot of road salt, Redmond road salt that goes out in the Rocky Mountains. So my son lives in Denver and he emailed us today and said there's a huge storm coming in Denver. I don't know if you guys heard that or not. I don't know. It's probably not going to hit you guys, right?
I think the guys not here in Montana, but I think the Wyoming people
they're going to get some.
Of it, and some into Nebraska.
Okay. So the clay, so this is the clay. This is on top of the ground, covers the salt mine. And there's all different colors of clay out there. And this is the clay that we have found has the highest electrical charge and meets the needs what we're looking for. So it's more of a tan color, and it's a combination bentonite and montmorillonite clay. Scott, pipe in if I'm missing anything, or if you want to add anything.
I'm doing good.
Okay, so why Redmond for the soil? 3 key things: increases feed quality or plant health, improves soil quality, and it's naturally simple. We're going to get into a little bit how this all happens, but I think I'll wait on that for right now. So here's a take-home point on feed quality. And this was actually on our field research. On average, we've seen increases in TDN, which is total digestible nutrients, of 4, relative feed value of 12, and a little bit of yield bump. Remember, in our products, there's no nitrogen and very small levels of P and K. So something was causing this. On grasses, we've seen very similar as well. Overall, I'd say with private research, field research, and feedback from our customers, and when we look at feed tests and so forth, we see an increase of anywhere from 3 to 10 points in TDN, 10 to 30 points in relative feed value, and yield, just a little bit of a yield. This is not really products that, as far as we know now, are not going to dramatically increase yield. But we do feel that there's a return on it and there's cost savings because there's other benefits to it besides yield. We'll get into that. So we did this Solvita test our first year on private research. We've done 4 years. We're doing some more this next year. And when we put on 100 pounds of salt per acre, we jumped significantly the mineralizable N on grass and corn silage. You can see the increase here versus the control. And then biomass carbon. The Solvita test measures the biology breathing. And so if you have more carbon from the carbon dioxide, that means you have more microorganisms. And the more microorganisms you have to a certain point, you are going to have more mineral uptake. So it's a positive. The way this happens is because our salt has a huge amount of electrical conductivity, very high. Every living cell needs some electricity. Soil needs electrical conductivity. It's also known as soluble salts. And I was just yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, I was on the NRCS website. They said one of the best ways to determine if you have healthy soil is to just measure your electrical conductivity. Because if you don't have enough energy in your soil, you're not going to have the biology. It's going to be sluggish. It's going to be weak. It's not going to be active. So this was on our private research as well. What they told us, the researchers, they brought to our attention, they said, you guys are seeing some nice increases in organic matter. We didn't even realize our products did that till they told us. So on year 1 to year 2, we saw a 15% increase on organic matter. On year 3, we saw 9%, and then we saw CEC going up too. So when that happens, there's some positive things going on with the biology because they're responsible for doing that. So then on, I think it was 2 years ago now, we looked at putting our treatments on new seeding alfalfa on a really, probably a clay loam soil. It was about a 5% organic matter, 20 CEC soil. And it's interesting to know that we did not see any benefit until after 60 days. And then we saw about an 18-point increase in relative feed value and a 3-point increase in TDN. But this is the soil where we went in and we measured where it says fertilizer, that's the control fertilizer. And this is the Redmond treatment, Redmond treatment. And we increased from 16 to 57 of these units on our treatment, which had clay and salt on it. The protozoa came in, and in the control, there wasn't even any detected before we put some on. Protozoa is a favorite food of bacteria, like I mentioned earlier. So guess what? I think that's one reason we increased the bacteria, because we increased the food source for it. Then the nitrogen potential went up because protozoa helps deliver nitrogen, bring in nitrogen. So we saw an increase there as well. We had a private researcher in Illinois. He found out about our salt. He was intrigued. He started testing it for 2 years. And we saw about a 50% decrease in parasitic nematodes on soybeans. And he was very, very excited, as we are too. We're changing the environment. When you have more available balanced minerals for life in the soil, there's going to be a benefit. And we think here what happened is we created a better environment for the good guys, and so they took care of the parasitic nematodes. So what's the benefit of the clay? Well, it's interesting to know that the clay has a low electrical conductivity, but it's got a high CEC. So if your soil is about a 10 CEC, as an example, this is going to have about a 45 CEC. So, and it's only got 3% salt. So that means it's got 97% space to hold and release moisture and more nutrients. So we're calling it a 1-2 punch because just like in livestock, we are convinced that you see the best results when you use the two together. We have played around with some of the blends. We figure we have a good idea now of where we need to be with blends. But if you look at this blend, this is SR, means stress relief. 65 is 65% clay, 35% salt. So we also have an SR50 blend. We have some guys that will order an SR35 blend, which would be 35% clay and 65% salt. But the amount of salt per acre, the sweet spot that we're aware of at this point is 50 to 100 pounds an acre. So if you're using SR50, we would recommend anywhere from about 100 to 200 pounds an acre. If you're using SR65, we're recommending 150 to 250 to hit that 50 to 100 pounds an acre of salt. I do have a photo of it. I can't see my picture, so I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not. Can you see that, Scott?
A little bit. I can pull. I've got one on my screen there too. I can pull up.
Can you pull that up?
Yeah, if you want to.
I'll keep going though, but
Okay, I'll pull that up here at the end.
okay. So application rates, we just talked about it. 50 to 100 pounds an acre of salt. Conditioner, that should probably say 50 to 200. We talked about the SR65 or SR50 course. We increase the size of the salt we use in it, and also there's a clay chip in it. So that'll spread out to about 50 feet, and there's about 75% less dust. We have farmers that are dropping this 2x2 on corn, and we also use it, the salt alone in foliar application and also in irrigation. 3 to 5 pounds an acre, 3 to 4 times a year in the morning on the leaves can make a dramatic difference on the quality of the plant and bring a lot of health to it. So the salt, you can mix it up ahead of time. You'll get a little bit of a grit in there. And so you need to screen it out or pull water off the top, but it's a very small amount. Takes maybe 3 to 4 hours to get the salt in solution, and it can be mixed with about anything that I'm aware of. I've never heard of it being a problem. I talked to a guy in Nebraska last week, and he's been using it 2x2 with a liquid fertilizer. He's been adding it with liquid 28, and he's been adding it with 1034O. And he puts on 2 pounds right down there, 2x2, along with, I think it was about 14, 15 total gallons, I think it was. And no problems at all. We got guys mixing it with humates, liquid fish, all sorts of different fertilizers. So it's natural. It does not seem to interfere with other fertilizer. We got guys mixing the salt with chemicals. They swear that it helps the chemicals get into the plant easier. And so that's another benefit too. We have farmers that say when you put this on forages, it improves the flavor. Makes sense, right? What is salt? Salt's a flavor enhancer. And the amount we're putting on at 50 to 100 pounds an acre, it's like you're taking a salt shaker and seasoning your soil, because one acre, top 6 inches, 2 million pounds. So you're putting on 50 to 100 pounds of salt on 2 million pounds of soil. You're not going to kill everything because of that. So Here's the key thing, what I'm finding. I'm looking at soil tests, feed tests from all over the country. And I do not see too much salt in the soil. What I'm seeing is a lack of salt in the soil. And it's because we're having, in areas where we have enough moisture, that's the situation. And what we're seeing is the electrical conductivity is delivered by the soluble salts. It just happens that the minerals that are responsible for the soluble salts, most of them are anions or negative charge, which means they leach out of the soil. So basically, those soluble salts are being washed out of the soil, washed out of the root zone, and a lot of these soils are lacking energy, which is having an impact on the biology. That's what I feel is happening, because I don't think we'd be seeing these responses otherwise. We're not seeing a buildup. We got guys using it for 7 years now on their soil, and everything's staying right in line. We have checks and balances in place. And what you can look at on a soil test, on a feed test. So as long as you're watching things, you can keep it in balance just like any other nutrient. But you just have to stay on top of it. So that's all I got, Scott.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Tim. This is incredible. I'm sure there's a lot of questions out there. So if you have any questions, you can just raise your hand and I can unmute you, and we'll take some time for Q&A. While you guys are getting that, I'll throw one more quick poll up here just on the application. Your application process, if you can answer those two questions real quick, we'd appreciate that. If anybody's working on that. All right, thanks, that's coming along. Let's finish that up here in a few seconds. Okay, that's kind of what we're seeing here on that.
Okay.
All right, any questions? Go ahead and raise your hands, or any comments. I'll click and unmute you. I'm gonna grab the screen here and come over here and show these. Okay, you guys able to see that? Let's see what I've got. I can't see it with all my stuff pulled up here. Okay, so this is the SR65 that we've got. That's just in its natural form. This would be what we would feed to the cattle. We've got, let's see, next one. This is the coarse. As you can see, that's the coarse product, that SR50 or SR65 come in that form.
Hey, Scott, let me, sorry to interrupt, but that SR65 course, if you put that in water, that will start to dissolve in 15 minutes. It'll be like totally dissolved in 1 hour. So some farmers get a little nervous about the size of those particles, but it's nothing to worry about. It'll break down real fast.
This is the number 10 sea mineral or salt. So that's the finer salt. And this would be the number 4, which is a little bit more coarse salt. So just wanted to pull that up there. And let's see, we've got some questions coming here. So we got a question there. So 200 pounds per acre of SR65 on dry land, Tim?
So on dry land, you would not have to use that much because cost, what's going to be the average cost, Scott?
So you're looking, so
Per ton.
Nebraska would be kind of be a nice middle ground. And for truckload pricing of totes, it's about $340 a ton delivered. So if you're at 200 pounds per acre, you're at $34 an acre. If you are at 100 pounds per acre, then you'd be at half of that, so $17 or so per acre.
So on dry land crops, normally what I recommend is what is the potential yield on dry land crops? So I guess what I should say is that 100 to 200 pounds an acre of like SR50 or 150 to 250 pounds an acre would be on non-dry land. So you could probably go for sure, probably half. I mean, it all depends, I guess, what your yields are typically. But I think of Scott ran a test a few years back and he took out 50 pounds of MAP and replaced it with 50 pounds of SR65 on dry land wheat. Still kept in 80, 85 pounds of urea. And we saw an advantage. We saw 4 bushel increase per acre. Wasn't it a heavier test weight, if I remember right, too,
Yep.
Scott? I think it was. And so there was a benefit to doing that. And so, yeah, you can cut back on dry land wheat because you wouldn't want to, necessarily add that much. So I'd say 50 to 100 pounds an acre would be sufficient. You can kind of base that on the sodium level in your soil, the chloride level in your soil, and the soluble salt level in your soil. Now, not everybody tests for that. I encourage farmers to test for that so you can get a handle on this. But, where you have what you have right now, the information. So.
Okay, once again, it's great having Tim on here. So if you had questions or thoughts, go ahead, raise your hand, and we'll be able to visit with him. I can unmute your microphone, and you can talk on that. Another thing, Tim, that we've talked about on this, you've mentioned it a couple of times here. A lot of times guys are able to reduce some of their fertilizer inputs and replace it with the lower cost Redmond products and actually maintain or boost production. So I'm going to unmute your, let's see, allow you to talk. So Brian, go ahead. Are you able to unmute yourself? Go ahead, Brian. I can't hear you. No, you got something there. So Brian's down in Nebraska. I know he's been talking quite a bit with Tim.
Yeah.
And so, is anybody else on there? Why?
Yeah, he's asking about can you read his chat?
Oh, okay. Well, now multitasking here. Okay, so what's the chat say? I can read your chat. Yep. No mic.
No mic.
Okay. You can also type your questions in on the question thing there, but go ahead and if you want to type in on your chat, either way, we can get to you. Okay. Do you see that, Tim? How often do you apply?
How often do you have to apply? So I recommend every year. And the reason being is, first of all, I think every living system needs to be fed more often than not. And you're not, when you look at the percentages of minerals you're adding, you're not adding these high levels. And I have not seen that it builds up tremendously. Now, don't know for sure on your soil types and stuff, but we're going to have a sense of that when you do the right, when you measure the right things on your soil tests and you measure the right things on your like tissue tests or whatever you're using to reinforce what's going on in your soil. So I like to put it on every year. I'd rather put some on every year than like put it on a heavy dose extra and then only have to do it once every 3 years, because you're relying on nature a little too much and the right, correct weather patterns, and you're hoping it's going to be there and release when the plant needs it. And that's just not always the case. So I should say that also we see the optimum results after 30 to 60 days when you're putting it on broadcasting. When you're putting it on as a foliar, it can be available 10 times faster. And we've seen results in 10 days. So 5 or 7 days even, so it's highly available when it's in the liquid form. Takes a little longer to work through the soil and with nature. So just give it a little time.
I know your guy you were talking to in Western Nebraska, he's been using it for at least 12, 14 years.
Yeah.
Or East, I guess he's Eastern Nebraska, Norfolk up there that you
Yep.
were talking with him. So maybe mention, I know we had a dealer webinar here last week, and one of the questions came up on grasshoppers and some of the concerns of drought throughout the region. And is there, maybe talk a little bit on that on the drought side of things? How does the CEC, does that kind of help out with some of that? And then also the grasshopper or insect.
One of the things I've discovered is, so when you have enough salt in the soil, it's going to help bring moisture. It attracts moisture, and it's going to help bring moisture into the root zone. What I also learned is when you have too much salt, it takes away moisture from the root zone, and that's when you can get root burning. Now that's the same with any fertilizer, in the salt in any fertilizer, which a lot of fertilizers, they don't tell you to put it on the seed. They don't call it seed safe. But I believe when you get more nutrient uptake in a plant, you get a healthier plant. So I'm not sure about grasshoppers, but I know like on alfalfa, leaf, there's leaf hoppers and weevils and a lot of that. That's what we have in Wisconsin, probably more. And when you get those complete proteins and complete sugars through healthier soil and using more natural and more diversified fertilizer, that then those plants have better resistance. They're more drought resistant. They recover faster. Your soil recovers faster. Things just get better and better when you bring in more minerals and you bring in more balance. Scott, you have a good story about the grasshoppers from
Yeah, that was one of the big, one of our first webinars that we had with Redmond. Had a picture on a field where there was a bunch of white specks up on the side of a hillside, and then there was none down in the alfalfa field. And question was, why is that? And it was because the grasshoppers aren't in the field; they were up on the hillside, and the birds were up eating the bugs and things up there. So anyway, that's pretty interesting. And other questions while we got Tim on here? Don't want to take everyone's time this evening, but if you've got any other questions, we'll hang out here and
Scott, we've I've shared a lot of information. A lot of times what happens is it's a lot to digest, so those listening are going to probably think about some of this, and then they're going to come up with some questions. So feel free to give me a call. I talk to farmers and ranchers all over the country about this. So it takes a while to make sense of it. I realize that. And I look over soil tests with people just to help them out there, you know, and see how this might fit what they're doing. So, yeah, I'm open for that. So.
All right. Well, we'll take one last chance here. Any questions? Go ahead and raise your hand or type it in the chat. This webinar will be recorded and put on our website. Just pull that up real quick here. Let's see here. So this is the website, and right down here at the bottom will be, well, it must not be on the right page. Sorry about that. I'm on the cattle page. On the website down at the bottom, the webinar will post, and we'll post right down here on that next recent webinar that comes up. And feel free to check out. This is Tim was talking about the 1-2 punch of the Redmond soil, the sea minerals, and volcanic ash together. The high electrical conductivity of the sea minerals with the volcanic ash with the high holding capacity. Some good information there, along with application rates you can check out on the website. All right, any final questions? Check everything here. I think we've got everything taken care of. I appreciate everybody's attention here this evening. If you had any questions, shoot an email to me, scott@agribestfeeds.com. I can get you in contact with Tim, get his information out, and we'll go from there. Hope everybody stays warm and safe, especially you guys in the middle of the storm coming through the Midwest there. And we'll talk to you all later. Have a good night.
All right. Good night.